So, Dave, we've been talking about the 80s cruise. It's February 27th to March 6th, right? Great artists, OMD, Bret Michaels, Nile Rodgers. It's going to be great.
Yes. However, because of the popularity now of the 80s cruise, it's all sold out. So what is one to do?
One is to put their name on the wait list. And all you have to do, your name, email, cabin preferences, and remember, what do you have to do to get that discount?
Oh, you use that WDDIM code, which stands for What Difference Does It Make? And probably a good chance that you'll get on the cruise, I would imagine, because, life happens, right? What's going to happen? Life happens.
There are bound to be cancellations, so get on the wait list.
Yeah, anything can happen, including you getting on the 80s cruise. So submit your name, include the WDDIM code in the additional notes, and you may be sailing away on the 80s cruise in 2026. Just remember to go to the80scruise.com. That is the 80s cruise.com. The80scruise.com.
And remember, this credit is for new guests only.
I had that dream again. My small business needs to hire, but I don't use LinkedIn, and I hire wrong. So then I'm doing IT, and when I go to plug the servers in, they become sentient, and they won't let us access our network unless we forward their chain emails and memes to more and more and more people, and then I wake up.
Don't let hiring nightmares ruin your dreams. LinkedIn Jobs' new AI assistant finds and invites best fit candidates to apply, so you can discover talent you may have missed. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/quality. Start hiring today with LinkedIn.
Hey, Holly.
Hey, Dave.
What's going on with yourself today? Happy New Year. How are you?
We can still say Happy New Year because, as we know, we can say Happy New Year up until the very end of January.
If anybody's listening to this in February or beyond, we apologize that, I'm sure it is a Happy New Year for you.
We can still say Happy New Year if we feel like it. We're making the rules here.
Well, Happy New Year to you. And so how are we ushering in our new year?
Oh, we're letting some stories be told. That's how we're ushering in our new year.
Okay, with what?
We are talking...
With whom? Is it with whom?
With whom? With whom are we speaking?
To whom it may concern. What are we referring to?
That's my line. We are speaking with Bill Janovitz, who wrote a biography of the Cars called The Cars, Let the Stories Be Told.
Yes. One of my stories is that the Cars debut is, besides it being just probably a top 5 debut album of all time, this was the first record I believe I bought on my own with my own cash, riding my bike to my local record store and plucking down the $4.97 to Licorice Pizza, getting 3 cents change in pennies, and just playing this on end, just playing side 1, flipping it over, playing side 2, then flipping it over, playing side 1, and to infinitum. It's locked into my brain now.
Until the grooves are worn away?
Yeah, no, I know all the words by heart. So this is one of those albums. I can't sing any new albums if my life depended on it, but the Cars all the way through.
These first couple of Cars albums, they were like the epitome of the new wave.
Yeah, I was very happy they got played on AM radio, which is what I was listening to as a 12-year-old. And that's how I discovered it. Just clearly stood out for me because I'm like, what is this? I should look further into this album, whoever this is. So I made the crazy choice to spend my hourly wage of babysitting money or whatever it was to get this album. So that was nice. It was a very good intro for me. Yeah. It intrigued me enough where I kept playing it over and over again because it was the only album I had. But apparently it stuck with me. I did not go, well, I think just because it was so different, it took one hot minute for me to really get into it. And I was all in.
But I just remember hearing Just When I Needed It.
Yeah, initially, that was the only one song that I liked. But maybe it was smart of them to put it on as the third song because, you have to get through, there's Good Times Roll and then My Best Friend's Girl, which was good. I liked it initially. Of course, it grew on me tremendously, but Just What I Needed, I guess, was the first time listen for me. So I enjoyed that. Anyway, we're going to talk to Bill about the Cars, aren't we?
We are going to talk to Bill about the Cars, and I think we're also going to talk briefly to Bill about his own band, Buffalo Tom.
Yes, Bill is not only an author, he is a musician and a talented one at that. One of those bands in the mid 90s and Claire Danes' favorite band. So he had kind of like a Cars moment where they got to play the same clubs that the Cars play as they rose to stardom in the late 80s, early 90s. So we're going to talk with Bill about his book. Sometimes, people get busy and they can't listen to the full hour episode. Is there any way that they could hear like little clips of what's going on in this world of podcasting that we do here?
Thank you so much for asking, Dave. Absolutely. You will find clips from our interview with Bill Janovitz on our YouTube channel. And What Difference Does It Make podcast? And also on our other social media at WDDIM podcast and maybe even TikTok, where lots of people seem to be joining us.
Very nice. Okay, so why don't we dive into it? This is Bill Janovitz on the What Difference Does It Make podcast.
Hello,
Hey!
how are you?
Hi, Bill. Welcome to the podcast.
What is your Cars origin story? How did you fall upon this band from Boston?
Yeah, I kind of opened the book with it. I talk about being 12 years old there in Huntington, Long Island, and I didn't have any older siblings. I'm the oldest of 5, but my friend had a brother who was already in college, and he would come back in an orange Camaro bearing these astonishing albums, either like deep albums that we didn't know about, like Black and Blue by the Stones. I remember that sort of coming in and going, oh yeah, I kind of heard 1 or 2 of these songs, but we would go deep into these records that he bought. It was just around the age where we were starting to buy our own albums. But he was the coolest guy I know, of course, with an orange Camaro and these amazing records. One day he brought home, at least this is sort of my memory of it all. I'm sure it's a bit apocryphal, but I just remember sitting in my friend Jeff's bedroom with this album, The Cars, and I wasn't sure. It's sort of like when U2 Boy came out later. It was only a couple of years later, we talk about, is it U2 Boy or is it it's the name of the album, U2 Boy? Like, he didn't know. I was like, is The Cars... what is The Cars? It was just so cool. And of course, I talk about like dropping the needle and It's Good Times Roll. I'm just going, what is happening? This is amazing. It's like old and new at the same time. And, it's around that age where everything is wide open. And in 78, when I was 12, it was like Devo were on SNL. And I remember watching stuff like that. And the B-52s a year or so later. And The Cars on Fridays. And it was just like all this new stuff. I finally felt like now music was being made for me as opposed to me going back and finding these old records like Black and Blue by the Stones, whatever, which is only a couple of years old, whatever it was. But it was like, it wasn't Southern rock and it wasn't arena rock. It was something fresh.
Your point about it being, this is the new wave of music. This is our music. But being 13 years old, that was still relatively, even though we loved music before that, it really brought back how much of an impact this band at that kind of an early age had.
Yeah. I mean, when I was pitching this book and when we were starting to talk about it with my agent, and he was like throwing out potential titles, and one of them was like The Cars, Inventing the 80s or something like that. And of course, Devo were around the same time. I mean, they're single. They didn't have a record out, I don't think, around an album. They had like Chaco Homo and I don't know, they had a single or 2 out maybe by the time this record came. So it was all around the same time. I mean, of course, Kraftwerk and Brian Eno, and there were so many people and Bowie can lay claim to these foundational things that led to what we think of as the 80s, which is a lot more synth stuff, and sort of a newer look. And then, of course, videos in 81, 82, starting, on MTV. So the Cars were there for all of it. And it was like they had, what I love about the Cars, especially those first, 3-4 records, is that they're rooted in the past, even though they're like, it's like 1 foot in the past and maybe a foot and an arm in the future, or however you want, stupid metaphor you want to use. It was like they were very much forward leaning, especially with Rick and Greg and David. We're all very much sort of pioneering in terms of like, what's new, what's the fresh stuff that's bubbling underground. But yeah, it's like this presentation of like synths with guitars with sort of a ironic vocalist and different lyrical content, like as I talk about in the book, it's this anti-hero most of the time. And that comes from where? That maybe comes from Jonathan Richman, and then David Byrne is doing a similar thing. But the anti-hero thing was a fairly rare thing until the late 70s in terms of pop music, especially guys singing.
Now, I remember hearing Just What I Needed on 93 KHJ in 1978 and jumping on my bike and then seeing it. So AM radio was my insight into New World. And, I was very thankful that Top 40 played them. What were you listening to as a kid when you were like 11, 12? And,
Yeah, I mean, around that age, I had grown up, same thing, oldest of 5 kids. I got some great records, in weird ways, like my grandparents' neighbors gave me these records, which I treasure to this day, including the Stones' Out of Our Heads with a mono, great record that's probably worth a lot of money now, and Bob Dylan's Highway 61. I'm talking about like being 8 or 9 years old. These are your first albums and you just get lost in it. It's like, what is happening here? And I was one of those kids like you and like these musicians that all have these stories of like growing up and listening to transistor AM radios and being addicted to it. And I still, I had this Panasonic Panapet, the round thing on a chain, and I brought that everywhere. And WABC in New York, but very soon, like 73, 74 in New York, we get WPLJ and WNEW, the FM things, the freeform FM starts, and up in Boston, which I didn't move to until 82. WBCN, which was where Max Ann was, and which was instrumental, and who was instrumental in breaking the cars. I mean, there were stations like that in New York. I 12, 13-ish. I remember hearing Patti Smith and sort of grouping like Bruce Springsteen and Patti Smith together, which is not unusual. They have a song together. But like these singer-songwriters and Graham Parker, they were playing Lou Reed and then Talking Heads in 77, 8. So I was hearing this stuff. I remember hearing Graham Parker on the radio back there. Weird. And then Joe Jackson. So yeah, I mean, the sort of initial punk rock thing, I was a little young for, like you guys probably. It was like the Sex Pistols I remember hearing about, especially in New York. It was all over the news with Sid and Nancy and the tabloids and stuff. But it was like, whoa, what's that? It was all those things. And then when I came to Boston, I was a junior in high school. It was somewhere before my junior high school. And then it was like college radio. We had college radio on Long Island a little bit, but there was more like some adventurous stations that were commercial, like WLIR and the ones I already mentioned. But there was Stony Brook, but it was mostly like blues and really cool music, but not like new rock and roll or new wave or whatever. When I came to Boston, of course, college radio, it still is like amazing here. So that turned me on to so much. And it was a real lifesaver in a lot of ways when I moved here because, you move into summer of your junior year. From a big town in New York to this rural town in Massachusetts. It was life-changing and life-altering in both good and bad ways. Then Boston had college radio is still very strong here.
Boston is a college town? Is that what I...
I mean, tip of the hat to poor Rob Reiner. That was a Spinal Tap reference for sure. Not a big college town.
Okay, so did you have an affinity for the Boston, like you talk about Rick having an affinity for the Boston bands? Did you?
I think the first album I bought around that same time it was like 76. So I would have been, 10? The first album I remember buying with my own money was Stevie Wonder. So all that stuff comes in, like the songs in the Key of Life, and then all the Beatles records you come back. And that's what I was talking about at the beginning of the conversation. You start filling in like you guys, I'm sure, did, fill in your catalog. But then, coming to Boston, the Cars bookended our adolescence, if I may speak for all of us. 12 years old when that first record came out, or 13 in your case. And then 17, I'm a senior in high school when Heartbeat City comes out. Yeah. And it was like the whole thing right there. But coming here, I was already sort of getting into more adventurous stuff. And then, the Boston bands I heard at 16 or 17 were bands like Mission of Burma, who were really important up here and really important to my own band because it was sort of like this edgy, wire art rock stuff, but still very like garagey, So that kind of stuff. There was a band called the Neats who were fantastic, pre-REM, but I'm probably getting that's probably a little later than 82, more like 83, 84, 85. And then, college and everything else happens at college with Replacements and Who's Could Do and blah, blah, blah. So by the time Heartbeat City came out, I felt like, what is this sound? I'm by that time I'm listening to REM and Talking Heads were still fairly raw until Burning Down the House and, whatever. I saw that tour. That was an amazing tour. But I was a little too snobby, I think, for Heartbeat City. Like,
we all were.
Dave.
We all were. I mean, that's,
You speak for yourself. I took it all in. Your book, which I thoroughly enjoyed, you kind of brought it into focus for me. I preferred the first couple of Cars albums. And kind of forgot that the biggest hits came on the ones that came after.
Yeah, I mean, Candio was obviously, it's sort of like 1A and 1B. It's almost like those records are just the same to me in a good way. The first one has gone out to sell 6 million. I mean, the first one, I talk about this in the book, it came out in June, was gold by October and platinum by December. So that took off enormously and quickly. I think that it still has outsold, maybe, I have to go back and check, but I think it's outsold to this day Heartbeat City, but Heartbeat City had more singles, and those videos were sort of iconic cultural moments.
Yeah.
And they won the first Video Music Award for you, I think.
You mentioned your band, which we did not talk about, but Buffalo Tom. And at the end of the book, you brought up your connection with the Cars, your worlds colliding musically.
We started in 86. But we didn't really get going till 88 or so, when probably our first record came out. Very much indie, it was the time of hair metal. And I mean, I'm rereading Bob Mayer's great book on the Replacements now. I had read it before, but I'm reading it now because it's such a hugely important book and band to me. I mean, by the time Buffalo Tom formed, they might have been number one to me, right up there with R.E.M. and Who's Could Do or whatever else. I mean, hair metal was just a different world for me. It was like, what's happening? It's like cartoonish, like Heartbeat City sounded cartoonish to me. And the videos underscored that. There was a cartoon element to it all. And I took this stuff deadly seriously. So my band started like in this very indie, very underground way. There's another great book called Our Band Could Be Your Life by Michael Azerrad. It's just sort of like lays out the circuit that we plugged into. It had just been sort of like this ground had just been laid out by these, Mission to Burma, Replacements, Minutemen, Black Flag, all. And we were assigned to SST, which is the home of Who's Could Do, Sonic Youth, and Dinosaur, and Black Flag, and Minutemen. And that was our first label. I should say when we started, we didn't really aspire to anything other than like, let's just do this band. And let's, Dinosaur Jr. were at our school, and Jay was a friend and produced our first couple of records with us. And so we aspired to that and the Pixies and that level. And so it was like a different world than MTV and the Cars and mainstream stuff. Yeah, and then the band was on the road solidly until 99. And then we said, okay, a lot of things conspire, but let's sort of stop now and have families. And this is a good time to sort of not see each other for a bit. And then everything since has been just sort of for fun. And we're still doing it 40 years. But yeah, so one of the fun things I'm still able to do is these benefits, or, we achieved a certain amount of notoriety. The phone will still ring sometimes. And I got this call to go out to do the Wild Honey benefit there in the Valley. I was there for the Kinks one, and that's where I met Elliot Easton. So David Jenkins, one of the organizers, said, "Hey, would you want to be part of this?" I said, "Yeah, of course." And he said, "Well, it was a Village Green Preservation Society thing, but they were doing more Kinks songs. And all the Preservation Society album were taken." And so I said, "How about Stop Your Sobbing?" He said, "Sure." So I said, "Fantastic." He's like, "Who do you want in the band? Like, do you want to have Elliot Easton on guitar?" I'm like, "Of course I want Elliot Easton on guitar." He's like, "Do you want Pete Thomas of the Attractions on drums?" I'm like, "Of course I do." Well, we got Dennis Dyken of the Smithereens, which is just as awesome. I met all these people, and it's like, it's LA. You guys live there. So for me, it was like, what? Like we've done a benefit here for like 20 something years, where it's like trying to get people to come to Boston in the winter to do this benefit is like, but in LA, everybody comes, and Brian Wilson came down for the Beach Boys tribute or whatever. So it's like crazy. So anyway, I struck up this relationship, this friendship, but just at least a correspondence with Elliot at the time. He's a very warm, approachable, open, wears his heart on his sleeve type of guy. And he was in fact getting a little misty because they had just gotten inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And he was telling me about what it would have meant to his mom. And he really did get a little misty. And he said he had my first Stones book. I'd written one on Exile on Main Street, and that blew my mind. And so we ended up talking about music a lot and corresponding about music. I wrote an article about Elliot and the experience. The experience sort of framed it, as it does with this book a little bit. Just was an article about my love of the Cars and specifically with a focus on Elliot Easton, this great guitar player. So he loved it. And he ran it up the flagpole because I said, "Well, what about a Cars book?" And he said he was into it and he read it, but Rick was still around, Rick Ocasek, and he poo-pooed the idea, and it gave me an early glimpse of the band dynamic and how Rick was still very much in control. And then he passed, and in the interim, I done this Leon Russell bio, which got pretty good acclaim, and Elliot blurbed it, and I reran this idea, and they went for it, thankfully. And it was Greg who gave the book the name, because when Greg signed on, I said, okay, well, I look forward to working with you because let the stories be told. And I said, you just gave me the title right there.
We are talking to Bill Janovitz. He wrote a book. It's called The Cars, Let the Stories Be Told. And he's in the middle of telling stories. So we're going to break and be right back.
We're back on the What Difference Does It Make podcast with our guest, Bill Janovitz.
You said Rick's last name. Can you confirm how to pronounce it?
I can't confirm. I will say that I've heard him pronounce it as Okasik in an interview or something. And his name was originally Otkasik, not Otkasik, I think. So it's when he dropped the T. But I think either is acceptable. And in fact, somewhere in the book I talk about in their first or second press release, he phonetically spells it out as Okasik. But I don't know. I think it's Okasik. So we had to make a choice for the audiobook. So we chose Okasik.
Was surprising as we were young how old Rick was. I didn't realize he was in his 30s. Like it took a while for him to kind of figure out the formula, which is kind of rare now. I don't know of any rock and rollers who's have their first hits, pop hits in their 30s. So what was it that wasn't working in these initial bands, and what was it that once he found this lineup that he knew that this was it?
Yeah, I mean, he was obviously extremely driven and ambitious and determined to make music work. This might have been his final attempt, who knows? But he lived in abject poverty or at the mercy of his long-suffering second wife, who he was really with from most of those years. He wanted to be a writer, period. Like, it wasn't like he had some, I don't know how to describe it really in a better way than that. I think he had the ambition before, and I've said this, and I think people take it out of context. I think he had this ambition, and his talent caught up to his ambition. I think he had some early talent, but it wasn't like, I've listened to all these iterations, right? The ones that have been recorded, but he's trying on different bands and styles that more or less correspond to what the zeitgeist and what's commercially successful. I mean, he was really a big fan in those days he went from being a big Buddy Holly fan to being a pretty good Beatles fan, but not a giant. He was more of pre-Beatles. But then Dylan and Velvet Underground really spoke to him. And then later Suicide and Roxy and Bowie. And so he's trying to combine these things, but he was also really into like singer-songwriter stuff and like the Laurel Canyon-ish vibe, singer-songwriter stuff. And their first record is this trio called Milkwood, which is very pale, folky, quiet stuff, like 3-part harmonies, sometimes like CSN with Ben. And all of these things pretty much as they leave Ohio all the way through. Then the next thing is this band called Richard and the Rabbits, which is a bit more jazz fusion, swing stuff in there, more adventurous, little Zappa. Now Greg is in the band, right? So Greg Hawkes and these other guys from Berkeley, and they're kind of putting their stuff together with Rick's sort of writerly stuff. And Rick is, as somebody in the band, Fusby Moore said, Rick wrote to whatever band he was in. And the next band is this band called Cap'n Swing, which is kind of a club, rock and roll, goofy name, almost like a bar band thing. But you could hear now, okay, there's a couple of songs that actually became car songs. And then there's some stuff that's Cars-like, and you could hear it. You're like, they're almost there. They're almost there. And then they have this sort of disastrous showcase in New York. They don't have a unified look. Greg wasn't in that band, but Elliot was. David wasn't there yet. So they finally get Elliot and Greg back. They get David Robinson as the drummer. At the same time, Rick's writing has become a little bit more focused, a lot more focused, more concise. He's listened to a ton of punk rock and new wave and underground and art rock stuff. And it just sort of all coalesces with this band at this moment, just as it's meeting the zeitgeist. Now he's no longer sort of running to catch up with the zeitgeist. They're trying to figure out he's sort of now on the leading edge, right? And with this band, that's my biggest sort of mission with this book, was to sort of not describe Rick Ocasek and some guys. It's like, this is a band that he finally found success with, not coincidentally. This is like David Robinson turned him on to so much music. They all just got off on playing with each other. Like the first practice, David talks about, like, he was about to give up. You know, he had been in the Modern Lovers. He had been in DMZ, this underground sort of garage punk band here. Legendary around here, a really great band, but not commercially viable. But he's like, in this band, he's like, this is great, isn't it? This is amazing. And they all felt that way. And then it just instantly took off. But it by that time, to your original point about a half an hour ago, David, he was 33 years old, which I point out in 78 was older than Ron Wood, Neil Young, Steve Winwood. Specifically, Ron Wood is funny to me because he's in this band called the Rolling Stones, who are being genuinely questioned for putting out another record. It's in 78. Like, are these guys too old to be putting records out in their 30s?
Yeah, it was.
Okay. So I am curious if you mentioned Milkwood. You told a story in the book about somebody at one of the first Cars shows, somebody holding up a Milkwood album, and you specifically said Rick and Ben looked at each other like, what the fuck, why? And I thought that was really interesting because as a music fan, the first thing I thought was somebody wants to show that they had been with this band for so long, that they had been with these artists for so long, but the artists actually got mad about, got upset about it. They were trying to forget this part.
Oh, that's exactly it. Yeah. I mean, as you see in the book, Rick was a real compartmentalizer. He really boxed off people in his past and past iterations. And he wanted to seem like he came out of nowhere, that they came out of nowhere. And it did, like to how we described, like, what is this? When we were kids, like, what is this record? Especially, I mean, anybody's debut can seem like that to some extent, but when it's like this newish surface music, that's like, it's something new to you and shiny. But like, you don't see that it's just the tip of the iceberg. You don't see all that, those hippie and, sort of like journeyman years of were there. And they're not unique in this respect. I mean, the Motels were, I talked to those guys, to Marty and Gerard, and there were a bunch of, a lot of these guys, it's like somebody said, it wasn't Joe Strummer. This is a quote oft attributed to Joe Strummer, but he didn't say it. But it was something like the punks were just disaffected or angry hippies, They'd given up on their idealism. But there's some truth in that. A lot of these people had been through different things. I mean, I read England's Dreaming recently. Finally, I hadn't read that John Savage book, just about the Sex Pistols and the Clash and all these bands that were happening in England, right? But like, where did they come from? This Malcolm McLaren kind of art school thing from the 60s is part of his project in a lot of ways. And that's how the Cars were. I mean, if it weren't for the Cars, Elliot probably would have been, well, it's like Rick said, if it weren't for me, Elliot would still be playing blues solos and or whatever, blues scales. And there might be some truth to that. Who knows what Elliot would have done? But he's a rootsy player. He'd be the first to admit that's what he brought to the Cars, this sort of roots in the past, America's organic sort of Americana stuff.
That's why we love X and Billy Zoom as the guitarist.
That's right. Yeah.
I'm just curious with the writing credits, how you feel about that. In your book, you talk about it, and we know this. Bands that always share the credit, like U2 and REM and other bands, like unwilling to share the credit.
I'm open about my opinions. I mean, in the book, I'm an opinionated biographer, I call myself. I mean, it's like, there's a bit of a critic thing, but it's not for me to say ultimately how any band works. I mean, my band decided we were going to split everything equally, expenses, every dollar in and every dollar out. But I mean, we formed as three friends. Van Halen formed as friends and brothers. REM formed as organically as friends. And I've talked to Peter Buck about this, and he talks about it specifically on the blurb of the book. And it's like, he said the Cars were a cautionary tale of how not to run a band at the blurb. And I mean, I had just read The Heartbreaker, Mike Campbell's book. I had not before my book came out, but I read it subsequently over the summer and before my book did come out. And not coincidentally, the same manager, Elliot Roberts, but very similar situation. And I mean, that's more the norm. It's like, Lennon and McCartney, Jagger and Richards, whatever. It's usually songwriters. And it usually is about like, how did they get to this point where they're forming this band and this record's coming out, right? And if it's 3 friends, 4 friends, 5 friends organically forming a band, they're more apt to just go, okay, let's, but still most bands, the default is who brought the chords and the lyrics and the melody. But having been in a band for something this many years, and I write most of the ideas for the songs in the band, but my bandmate Chris has increasingly brought more and more over the years. But it's not just the success that the band brings commercially. It's like, what do they bring musically, right? And Elliot's solos are composed, right? And he talks about composing these solos at home, in the hotel room. and going through different ideas and going through different exercises to compose them. It's not just like, oh, I'm going to try this. Oh, that's good. Maybe if I change it here. It's more like sometimes he would hum a melody, sometimes he would sing the melody, and then he would maybe put a harmony to the melody, and he would just get rid of the melody and keep the harmony, and that would be the solo. But it was like there was obviously a lot of thought to this. And my point when I bring this up to people is like, if he had sung that on a microphone on the song in words, that would be a no doubt co-write, right? But since he just brought it as a guitar part, and just because Greg's hooks on the synths are parts on an instrument, it's like, well, this is not really. I mean, they are this. That's songwriting. That's not just arranging. That's arranging. It's like, well, maybe if we put the chorus over here and have strings under, that's arranging. My point is, in the book, is like, well, just because you want to make the case, the legal case that you are the songwriter, and therefore you get a royalty from record one sold on, because that's what mechanical and publishing royalties are. Well, now you're getting a lot more money each record than, the gulf is widening on each record between you and your bandmates. And how much money is so much money that you maybe say, well, maybe I should peel off some of this money that would go to me and just sort of do some profit sharing here. And there's nothing that would preclude you from doing that, even if you're on the record cover saying that you are 100% the songwriter.
And I think this was in later touring that Rick would fly first class and the other band members wouldn't, without them realizing that this was coming out of their collective money.
Let's say this. I think they were all flying first class, but he was flying on a private Learjet to and from this. It's cool because that's an interesting point. It's like they were all doing really well, right? So that would be Rick's point. And Greg is the most diplomatic guy in the band, and they all agree to this. And this is like what Stan Lynch says in the Mike Campbell book. Mike recounts these conversations with him and Stan Lynch, who is much more of a hothead, and say, look, you can get a bigger share of nothing, or you can take the smaller share of this a lot, and that's we wouldn't be here if it weren't for Tom Petty's songs. And Tom Petty would be more likely than Rick Ocasek to be able to keep going, and then I think, and without the Heartbreakers than Rick was without the Cars. I think that point had been made, actually. So yeah, they all did fine, but it's like, at a certain point, your lifestyle becomes, well, I'm a rock star. We're selling millions of records. We're selling out stadiums, but I have to go worry about next 2 years if we're not touring anymore. And Rick didn't want to tour anymore. He wanted to tour minimally. So that was a big deal.
But the lineup remained. I mean, there was no one ever dropped out. It's one of those rare bands where they stayed together and then they parted ways. Rick didn't bring anyone else. I mean, afterwards there was the new Cars, but it was these five guys. This was it. These are the
same
Cars.
Five guys. Even on their reunion after 11 years after Ben passed away, they didn't try to replace him with another bass player. They just went out without a bass player. I mean, it speaks to what the Cars were, and it was a band.
Well, I wanted to go back to the Rat. You paraphrased in the book Hunter S. Thompson describing the Rat. Just that whole scene. Did you play there? Did Buffalo Tom ever play the Rat?
Yeah. Buffalo Tom played the Rat. So that was when I was able to get a fake ID, a very bad fake ID. I was able to go see like the Del Fuegos there and some other bands. But yeah, once we got going, it was one of our places to try to play, and we were successful at it. So we played there a couple of times, but notably we opened up for Soundgarden there once in like 89, 88, which is incredible.
Explain what the Rat was like.
It was like CBGBs in terms of, had you been to CBs in the 80s or so think of like the vibe, the decor, the smells, the textures, but it was a smaller basement version of CB. So lower ceilings, not as powerful a sound system. The bar was sort of in the back and off to the side, but so you came into the basement and then went forward to the club. The bathrooms were in the back, but it was that very much that grungy punk rock vibe.
What was the bathroom like?
Yeah, I mean, it's like, as Brett Milano said in his book, she just back into print. It's called The Sound of Our Town. And it's about like the different iterations of the Boston rock and roll scenes over decades. And he said, by the 90s, it was down to one working male urinal. But that was like CB's, you just didn't even want to have to go into the bathroom. It was so bad. And like CB's, I don't remember CB's dressing room per se, but I think it was like the Rat, like a closet basically that you were like, it's just so disgusting. But we continue to play these sorts of places sometimes in Europe, like with spray paint all over the walls, and it's like, oh my God, how old am I to be doing this? But but the Rat was it was a dump, but it was our dump, and it was a real great scene there. But when the cars were there were tables and people dancing. And for us, it was just like this, small club where everybody's up to the stage kind of thing.
Across the street was like a discotheque or what? So it was like
I mean, so if you've been to Kenmore Square or near Fenway Park, it's like you got Commonwealth Avenue, which splits off into a Y. It's like a French boulevard, right, with a big middle section and 2 or 3 lanes on either side, 2 lanes, I suppose. So there was like a real DMZ zone there between, the sort of grungy punk rockers and the people that were all dressed up in their finery, like the equivalent of what we'd call bridge and tunnel people in New York, suburban people coming in, or people from the inner city actually too, because there was a lot of disco and R&B, and it was a dance club scene. So, and there were fights. I mean, I actually got a punch, but not from those people. But I was pulling my car in. Somebody got out of their car and punched. But this is sort of Boston too. Like you can't give somebody the finger without taking your life into your own hands. I guess it's anywhere nowadays. But it was still a very rough scene for sure. And you tread carefully. First, it was called Lucifer. Then it was called Narcissus and Lipstick. There were like 2 places there, but it was like, I had never been in there. It's a big, shiny mirror, Art Deco kind of lit up place. And the rat was subterranean. And yeah.
Wait, do you have to say you've never been in there in order to keep your reputation intact?
No, I would have loved to have gone in. I mean, later there were dance clubs around the corner on Lansdowne Street, which is, where Fenway is. And but I was never much of a dancer, much to my wife's dismay. When I'd go on tour, she'd go out dancing.
I wish I had known the Maxan story, because when I worked in radio, she had Moose and Squirrel promotion, and I talked to her all the time. I had no idea of this backstory of hers. Like Moose and Squirrel was her radio promotion company. I used to have a Moose and Squirrel shirt, and anyway. So the cars need their support system. You need your manager, but you also need, those tastemakers, and Maxan was one of them. Can you tell us a little bit about who this woman is?
So WBCN was, like I said, the progressive FM station here, but quote unquote progressive. It was still very much a boys' club in the early 70s. I mean, Peter Wolf got started there as a DJ before he formed Jay Giles' band. And so it was really sort of the heart of the Boston sort of rock and roll scene. She was recruited out from Seattle at the ripe old age of like 21 because they needed a woman on air because they had gotten some backlash, which I talk about in the book. Charles Laquadera, who is kind of a legend here, made some sort of offhand, he was reading some copy or just ad-libbed, for guys and chicks, for chicks want to come, for not just men, but chicks, and women got outraged at that. And there was a protest. They actually brought baby chicks and put them on the general manager's desk. And they got the lesson really quickly, and they recruited her out, to their credit, and she started on air. And in her tenure here, she broke almost single-handedly she broke the Cars. She broke Aerosmith. I mean, Steven Tyler credits her as breaking Aerosmith. She was instrumental in breaking Bruce Springsteen and Queen as well in America. So she was gigantic because it was an era where jocks could play whatever they wanted, pretty much, and they were hiding the carts from her. Where the tapes where they had this certain song on, because she was playing Just What I Needed as a demo too much, and they were getting phone calls for it before they had an album. She was housemates with the Modern Lovers, including David Robinson and Jerry Harrison, who went on to be in Talking Heads, and she sort of helped very much, as to the extent she could, helped the Modern Lovers get to at least the point until Jonathan sort of broke it all up, Jonathan Richman. Then she was trying to help Rick's other band. She met Rick, I think, in the Cap'n Swing era, and she was trying to promote them, but she was the one that told them to go get David Robinson, to go basically poach him from this band DMZ, who weren't really doing much. And they listened, and she told them about their look, and she said, Cap'n Swing looked like you guys met at a bus stop and said, let's form a band. I mean, she's an amazing character. She is a real colorful person when she speaks. So she's like, she's like, talks like this, she's like, you look like you freaking met at a bus stop and said, let's form a band. You got to get some cohesion. So she would have been a great manager. But again, the sexist times, I think Rick went in a different direction. But always respected her. And, Elliot Easton made sure to give her a shout out in his induction speech at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, which meant a great deal to her. She's a book in and of herself. I mean, she was with Billy Squier for a long time. They were in a relationship. He screwed her over. I mean, she got walked on.
Is she still around? Because we need to get her on the podcast.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, good luck with that. She's got no cell phone, no computer. She doesn't have email. She's got a landline.
Do you have that landline number?
I do. Yeah. Just leave her a message saying, I spoke to Bill Janovitz, and she's finally emerging and welcoming the attention. She came out to the book launch and she was happily in the crowd. And it was like a reunion. I'd be one of the great honors and benefits of doing this sort of thing. It's like reuniting people, it's like being a catalyst for these reunions. And it's just watch. I mean, some of these people, they thought they didn't even know the other ones were still alive, like they didn't know their old manager, Fred Lewis, was still around. And I don't think there's been any reunion there, but like, well, Fred Lewis I thought he was dead. Jesus, guys. He's in the phone book.
That's so crazy. For us, this was such an impactful period of time. But for them to say that they lost touch with, even having lost touch with each other, they didn't stay in touch. Like, we just think of them as the band. And it's it's so weird for them to think about them going their separate ways. But going back to Maxanne just for a minute, she threw her hat in the ring to be the tour manager, right? This was one of the stories you told in the book. And Rick said no.
Honestly, I forget the exact. I think there was probably a discussion before they hired Fred Lewis about maybe having her manage them as well, like in a general sense, not just road managing. But, she said herself, like, that would have been bad. Like, the times were such that I would not have been able to get much done as a woman, honestly.
Okay.
Not like, oh, I'm just a poor woman, but more like I would not have been respected enough. She didn't really know enough, I think, about management. She was, she was a disc jockey, but she gave great advice. So in that way, she could have been helpful. But Fred had some contacts already, Fred Lewis. And then, of course, once Elliot Roberts entered the scene, there was no messing around.
No, because I was wondering if that had to do with, because then she was mentioned less. And of course, once they were up and running as the Cars, I know how impactful she was early on. But I wondered if that led to a demise or if the relationship just became less over time.
I mean, it's sort of like, think about your own life and the things that start happening in your 20s, 30s, whatever. And people have kids and people move and there's all that stuff. It's just attrition, right? And then with the Cars, everything was so accelerated. There's so many puns, but everything seemed so accelerated that it was so overnight. I mean, I talk about like one or two old bandmates talking about like, oh, you guys are too good for me now. Or, oh no, they always sort of looked out for us, or, these different voices about that kind of stuff. But, then you get just wrapped up in your own life. And she went off into a different direction. She got hired by Elektra to be A&R and by the George Daly guy that signed her. And I think about this when I think about my own life when I talk about these kinds of things. Like, oh man, how come I haven't talked to that person? Oh, the phone, planes go both ways, that kind of thing, Mm-hmm. But the sad part is the Cars themselves. I mean, 10 years is a good run for almost any band, but the bands that go beyond that, you kind of expect it, right? But the way it kind of fell apart and the sort of intervening years and then the sad reunion with Ben at this final interview, that kind of stuff is just heartbreaking, just about people not being able to communicate effectively or just dealing with their own insecurities and how that gets in the way of personal relationships. That stuff, it transcends music, but bands are such a weird little petri dishes for human interactions.
That's true. And we put them on a pedestal and we don't necessarily think about them that way. You can't have a personality like me. I mean, Rick's, the jealousies that you talk about within the band and the way David, he was the one who was bitter a lot of the time during the course of the Cars.
He was a squeaky wheel for sure, too. Yeah. He wasn't just quietly bitter. He was sort of the check on Rick's power, as I say. And that caused a lot of conflict.
So I was surprised. It was David who designed the Cars logo. No background at all. And he just kind of threw this together. And it's kind of iconic.
He's a very visually oriented guy. And he still oversees their merch and their reissue packaging. And he works with this guy that translates his wishes, like he's more of an art director than an actual painter or graphics guy himself. But he's got impeccable taste. And beyond visual stuff, I mean, he's still listening to adventurous new music that I talk about. He turns me on to in the book. On our first meeting, he's telling me about stuff that I didn't know about. And he's like, whatever, 75 years old. And that whole black and red vibe and the different hair, the sort of, now they got these different hair. He was paying attention to this as a kid. He was talking about being to mod fashions as a teenager. And he was always sort of one of those people that's paying real attention and being able to translate it and take big, bold chances on yourself without looking like a goofball, and then very few men would feel comfortable painting their fingernails with the girls in the dressing room at the Rat, and he was that guy doing it, and nobody questioned it because he was getting all the girls too, you know?
Well, he and Ben.
Yeah.
Oh, Ben, yeah.
Yeah. So I was surprised. Actually, in my mind, looking back at the Cars, I always think of them as nerdy, dweebish type of band. But then like last night, I was watching like some Midnight Special stuff and just their look and Elliot. And they were cool as hell. I was like, wow, they really had like this look, this really rock and roll look that was surprising to me as I look back. Like, oh my God, I didn't realize.
I mean, they had different personalities, right? You have
Sure, you could see the personality.
heartthrob. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, Ben always looked like he's in soft focus no matter where he was.
Yeah, totally.
Then you get the yin and yang with Rick, with the tall, edgy, angular guy. And then you got sort of cuddly Elliot. But then there's, the more sort of geeky, owlish, nerdy, small guy, the diminutive guy, Greg. So, yeah, everybody's got their own little...
Yeah, you know what? It kind of reminded me of Cheap Trick in a way. Just like, okay, we got
right.
but they work together. Just everyone's got their own unique look, and kind of it all work together.
Yeah, exactly. Somebody was comparing recently. They're like, I saw something going around on social media. It's like some early-ish picture of the Black Crowes, and it's like with Steve Gorman. They're all like, they look like they're from the back of the Allman Brothers Alive at Fillmore East record. It's like you can't date it. And then there's Steve Gorman in a jacket. It's like somebody was like, why were the Black Crowes with their accountant in this picture? It's like it's like the Charlie Watts. It's like the Bunny Carlos.
Okay, so then also the videos were kind of similar. It was like they're acting goofy, but they always have beautiful girls in the videos, and you can always recognize the theme of a Cars video of what's going on. Something weird's happening, but there's always a beautiful girl. And let's put either a merry-go-round or they're up in space, but there's always going to be beautiful girls, no matter how weird.
The girls thing, I was like, it's funny because they all talk about like how they hated the first album cover, and I found that it's a real surprise, especially since they kind of continued on with that vibe once they got the full control. Mm-hmm. It's like, okay, so your second album is this Vargas pinup girl. Your third album is, Panorama. But then your fourth album is the woman shaking the cocktails. That one and the Candio were girlfriends of David's.
Yeah.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Who is the first on the debut album? Do you know this woman?
Natalia Meldova, her name was. She was a poet, an artist, and a model. She was obviously from Russia. She did die fairly young, I think.
Where'd they find that photo?
It was, I think this is sort of more the point. They were like, they had their sort of, part of it was like just a control issue, like what they wanted and what they wanted to do themselves. The inner sleeve is their original idea for a cover. It was a black and white collage kind of thing, much more edgy. And David even talks about like how he had they put it on an actual record and they had it shrink wrapped and everything. Like, this is our presentation and this is what it's going to be. And they're like, no. And so they didn't love this. I think they had to get used to it. So Elektra actually put together that whole shoot without them even being present for it. But I think it's the same photographer who did the ultimate back cover of the band as well.
Can I ask you one last, you talked about seeing your heroes at your club and, like the Replacements, REM, and like, these are my people. Suddenly Claire Danes is like, Buffalo Tom is my band. Did you recognize like, this is kind of like, all right, here's another level, or like, this is kind of iconic.
Oh, yeah, it's funny. I'm watching her now in the Beast in Me and going, I knew her when she was 15 and sitting in our bus and in our trailer on the set going, and Jared Leto, like, because he was in a band with his brother. He's like, what's it like being in a rock and roll band, like on the road? And like, they were 15, but they were like preternaturally mature and eerily so, like so well spoken. And it's like, I guess I shouldn't have been surprised. But yeah, that really took us to a different level for sure. It didn't give us retirement money, but it certainly helped bring in more women to the shows.
Kick it up a notch.
Well, it's a pleasure talking to you guys. I hate to run.
Oh, man, no worries. Thank you so much for spending some time with us.
Okay, did you get just what you needed from Bill?
Yes, really enjoyed chatting with Bill Janovitz, author of The Cars, Let the Stories Be Told. And he told them.
We did forget to talk about the ladies. I know you wanted to talk about Paulina, and I wanted to talk about Phoebe Cates. But, what are you going to do?
There were so many women. I cannot believe we didn't get to the women. There were so many women.
So many women.
Yeah, for a bunch of nerds. They had a lot of wives and girlfriends.
That's all you had to see. I should have learned how to play guitar, and I can't sing. It's tough. We talked about a lot, but we could have talked, there were 5 individual members of the Cars. I kind of wish we had gone through each and every one of them because they all have their unique story. It was, as we mentioned, it's nice that the 5 guys even though they hated each other near the end, they always respected each other. They knew that the 5 of them created something unique.
Yeah. It's great to know they recognized it because learning some of the interpersonal stories, it helps you understand a band better.
I had just finished rewatching the Beatles anthology, and when the Beatles broke up, Ringo left the band. He's like, I'm leaving the band. I'm not playing well, and you guys seem to get along. And, I'm just leaving the band. He tells that to John, and John said, I thought it was you 3. And then Ringo goes to Paul. He's like, it says the same thing. Paul says, well, I thought it was you 3. It's everything in your head. And, you think everyone's having a great time except for you. It's a marriage of 3 to 4 to 5 different people. And good luck getting everyone to be happy for eternity. So the book is 500 pages long, and there's a reason, because you have 5 different stories to tell. So we can't capture that all in an hour. But it's a well-told story, and Bill's a wonderful writer. So let the stories be told. How do we tell our stories, Holly?
We tell our stories all over social media at WDDIM Podcast and on our YouTube channel at What Difference Does It Make Podcast.
Follow us at WDDIMpodcast.com to see all our past episodes. And you can also sign up for our newsletter on our website. It's a monthly thing we send out. It's nice. It's a new year, New Year's resolution. Get more emails, right? Isn't that our New Year's resolution? Always, I want more emails.
1 a month. You will get 1 a month. And also, if you're the dangerous type, you can check us out on TikTok.
There you go. Very nice. Let's wrap this up. So subscribe and give a review if you like, because we have a new episode every Friday. So until then, this is Dave.
This is Holly.
Check you later.
Over and out.